Grüezi ragazzi, welcome e bienvenue to Cannabis Science's LinkedIn Live for this week. To those of you joining us live, thank you very much for being here with us today. And for those of you who will be checking out the recording at a later time, also a big thank you to you. We hope you enjoy it and that you perhaps leave the session having learned something new. A quick intro about Cannabis Scientia. Cannabis Scientia aims to combat the bottlenecks of the medical cannabis industry using the power of education and through the training of healthcare professionals on the effective use of cannabinoid medicines. In doing so, increasing access to medical cannabis for patients worldwide. On your screen right now, you see an overview of our services, as well as a QR code you can scan to get in touch with us. Also, something we're very excited about is the upcoming launch of our Principles of Clinical Cannabinology Handbook, which is just around the corner. Amongst other things, it covers the endocannabinoid system, clinical practices, regulatory landscapes, as well as available products in different jurisdictions. If you're interested in learning more about the handbook, reserving your copy, or learning more about sponsorship opportunities, please scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. And also this way you can get in touch with us. And last but not least, if you haven't head over to Cannabis Science's LinkedIn page, head on over, please. Give us a subscribe. And also, if you scroll down on our page a little bit, you'll see that we have a little bit of a contest going on at the moment. We recently hit 1,000 followers. Big thank you to all of you. We appreciate every single one of you. So that was my monologue. Enough of me for now. Today we will be discussing medical cannabis in Latino America and also discussing new possibilities of development. Joining us in today's session is Dr. Sandra Carrillo from Panama, who is a physician and a medical cannabis expert. And without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to her to maybe introduce herself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bijan, and thank you to Cannabis Ciencia and to my dear friend Viola for giving me the opportunity to share some insights in here. I am very excited to participate at this amazing program, and I really admire all the work you're doing on behalf of education because we need to promote education all over the world. So thank you so much.
And you are very active. Thank you for being here, first of all, and thank you for the audience to be spending a bit of time with us. You went very quickly on your own introduction because you're very humble, but what she wanted to say is that actually perhaps our match came out exactly by the fact that that's pretty much what you're doing on the other side of the world. And so there is where we felt like this synergy on this understanding of this need of actually spreading education as a means to allow more access for patients around the world. So on this, actually, I'm very grateful because although I'm not doing exactly your job, you're really in the battlefield with patients. But the values and the purpose of a lot of your work is actually going in the same direction of what we're trying to do here. And so I thought, what a better person to talk to us about some of the topics that we would like to touch on today, which are many. So I'm gonna have to fast forward all of us into starting actually with some of the things that I wanted to touch on today. For example, starting from perhaps, I know this could take perhaps the whole half an hour, but we'll try to be concise on what's the current situation of medical cannabis legislation. For example, you're originally from Colombia, but you work in Panama. Like, if you could speak even just about these two countries, and perhaps if we have a little bit more time, we want to compare to other countries in Central and Latin America, that would be amazing, actually. What's the current situation? We consider we don't know anything.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm going to do a brief introduction as you asked me to do. I am a physician, as Bijan mentioned. I have a master's in health services administration certification, research epidemiology. Also, I've been studying cannabinoid therapies for the last 8-10 years. I have specialty in anti-aging and regenerative medicine, and I've been working. I have a clinical practice. I am co-founder of Medicann. We have medical cannabis clinics in Colombia. We have a group of doctors in different cities of Colombia. I am also co-founder, and right now I am vice president of the Colombian Medical Cannabis Association. We are a non-for-profit scientific association gathering doctors from all specialties: psychiatrists, neurologists, oncologists, anesthesiologists. We even have dermatologists because we know the scope of cannabinoids to treat different types of ailments. So I am very excited because of this, and I have been able to promote education. I'm co-creator of a diploma certification in alliance with one of the largest universities in Colombia. Since 2019, we've been certifying a lot of doctors, not just from Colombia, from different countries. Also, I am co-creator and professor of the certification in alliance that we prepare with the Colombian College of Physicians, which makes me very happy to see how the College of Physicians looked for me and asked me, please, Sandra, we need to educate doctors. So we see how the academia is getting interested in this. And in Panama, I'm professor of the Faculty of Medicine, University of Panama, and I am in charge of the scientific and educational program. I have been invited to be professor, honorary professor, to diploma certification in Mexico, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil. So I think education is the key to destigmatize the use of cannabis as medicine. Regarding to your question about the situation in Latin America, particularly Colombia. Colombia is a country that legalized medical cannabis in 2000. Have a good amount of time walking this road. It hasn't been easy, but finally we have today in Colombia a very robust regulatory framework, and I will refer just to the doctor side. I don't want to get in that much into the industry side, which is very interesting too. But for the industry people that are listening to us, definitely Colombia is a place to look when you want to do like business development, since it has like a very good climate for growing facilities. It has labor that is not as expensive as is in other countries, and we have the history of cultivation and agriculture expertise in many fields. So right now the regulation in Colombia permits cultivation, transformation, which is like production, for export of products. Recently I was invited by the president of Colombia, the former president, to sign the Decree 811 that allowed the industry to export dry flower. That it was something that we were missing for many years, but now Colombia can export dry flower, among other things. So industry-wise, there is a lot of companies from all over the world looking at Colombia to put together like a cultivation facility, also developing all types of products and technologies, which it makes the industry and the markets in Colombia to be developed in a very interesting way. In the medical side, in Colombia, we are able to prescribe as doctors. We write prescriptions for our patients, and we have compound pharmaceuticals or magistral preparations. We have products. They are already regulated by the INVIMA. That is like the equivalent of the FDA. So we have products that we know are safe and that they comply with good standards of manufacturing and different standards that allow us as doctors to prescribe for patients. So those are the two main highlights. But the news that it makes me more happy is that I was fighting for the last 3-4 years for access for the patients, because before last year, most of my clinical practice was private. I had to I had to see the patients paying out of their pockets for the consultation, for buying the prescription, and in Colombia, not everybody has these resources. So we were fighting and advocating for the government to cover the healthcare system for the patients. And finally, after we had conversations with government, all the things were aligned. And starting from the 1st of January of this year, 2023, the government issued a decree saying that the healthcare system must cover the prescription for the patient. So this is huge for me, because we were seeing this sad thing of patients getting better, but then they have to stop the treatment because they couldn't afford it. But now this year, we expect the patients are going to have coverage by the healthcare system. Not happening yet as the way we want, but we are pushing for that and working and doing things to make it happen. In Panama, I was involved also in the process of advocacy, working with the government, with the senators, with the Congress, helping to draft the legalization project that finally, a year and a half ago, became a legalized medical cannabis in Panama. And we are right now implementing the regulation in order to be able to have access for the patients. Is a very robust regulatory framework too that allows doctors to prescribe. We have a registry for patients in Panama. We're going to have it. We haven't implemented yet. We're waiting for the government to finish it. So in Panama, everything looks very good too, because it is a very robust. And when we were working with this project of law, we were trying to see the model of other countries in Latin America and in the rest of the world, since it's a very brand new law. And I was telling the congressmen and the senators, let's grab the pieces of the regulations of every country and let's see what mistakes they made, so we don't make the same mistakes. And let's take all this amazing knowledge of the things that many governments did well. So that's what I like the regulation in Panama a lot. We're just waiting for the implementation, but good things for the patients, good thing for the doctors, and good things for the industry, because in Panama is going to be cultivation, all the chain from cultivation to export, import. So great news for everybody.
Well, first of all, very, very impressive. You mentioned yourself not only in so many educational programs, but also literally in the making of regulations also. And as you just said, by pinpointing what's the best case scenario and what's the worst, and what route can we go and make sense to go. And something that you just mentioned now actually just came to my mind, a couple of questions regarding this. One is whether you wanted to added any advice maybe for anyone any entrepreneur actually wanting to work in your country. And because I heard you mentioning this as also, I guess, as a strength to give back to the country through cannabis, I believe, which I would like maybe if you could explore for a moment. And also very, very impressed about this last point, which for me, it's a fundamental point, regarding the access of cannabis within a medical context, which is so far that everyone needs to pay for by their own pocket, especially in systems where there is substantially a public healthcare. It becomes difficult to sustain a therapy even that is beneficial. So I was wondering on your thoughts regarding the relationship between medical cannabis helping perhaps to address healthcare disparities in Latin America, for example, in marginalized communities.
Yeah, that's something that I've been working. I am part of the International Phytomedicines Institute. I am the Latin American leader for this initiative that was born from the Global Health Catalyst initiative. That it was an initiative, again, that was born from a group of professionals. And it started, I was invited by Dr. Will Noir, that is a professor, John Hopkins, Harvard, and they created this. He's been doing research. He did an amazing publication a few years ago, and a preclinical study that he did on a treatment of pancreatic cancer in, of course, preclinical, was in mice, for treating pancreatic cancer with metastasis with a special they call it tiny drone technology, and these tiny drones are loaded with a flavonoid derivated from the cannabis plant, and they use radiotherapy. This doctor is a radio oncologist, so I was invited to Harvard to see all this work, and since then we've been working because he created this Global Health Catalyst Initiative and the International Phytomedicines Institute, and the purpose of this is to eliminate disparities in the countries that they have less access to education, less access or funds for research. And we actually, I was telling you earlier, I'll be speaking at UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, on the 3rd of May. Precisely on behalf of this initiative. Now we are looking to start a very large clinical trial with this treatment that I just mentioned, with the technology that they developed in radio oncology, and loading these devices with this flavonoid derivated from the plant of cannabis for pancreatic cancer with metastatic situations. And then we're looking forward to do more research in chronic pain and other pathologies. And this is a very large initiative where Johns Hopkins, Harvard Medical School, Brigham Health Hospitals, and British College of London, all these important institutions are going to participate, and it's going to be a large multi-centric clinical trial that we are expecting to start very soon. So this conference in UPenn is going to be very interesting because we are aiming to, the International Phytomedicines Institute is aiming to eliminate disparities and provide with funds and promote research and education in countries, as you mentioned, that they don't have the resources for education and for research. So, and there is some funds from the NIH for all this research. And I am very excited about this because I think education is research, and research is going to keep driving cannabinoid therapies to position themselves in all the time in a better place. We have a lot of scientific evidence, but of course we need to keep building more to keep proving the scientific community that medical cannabis is a very important alternative for all doctors, and I see it every day in my clinical practice.
Thank you, Bijan. Look, it's very impressive. I was nodding in the backstage and just being really admired by the event that you're organizing, actually, and the project. It's really impressive, and thank you for doing it. But I think, and I couldn't agree more on what you just said regarding education, but also being in this field, I also realized that just putting together the pieces of knowledge from science and literature is, in a sense, a bit a limitation, especially for a practicing medical doctor. And so actually, thanks also to your contribution and that of other doctors around the world, we felt, for example, for our upcoming book, Principle of Clinical Cannabinology, that it was needed and required as well to share as a form of knowledge and education for other doctors, also what comes from the real life experience. And so we collected some case studies of different cases of different pathologies with patients that you have been treating, and because there you can actually see what's the reality of things. So I can read on the book the, let's say, perfect therapeutic model for XY pathology. But as we always say, we are not treating a pathology, we're treating a person. And so it makes sense to look at that person and to look at what other drugs is this person using? Are there any other comorbidities? And so it was very, very useful, actually, to be able to have the opportunity to come to people like you and actually ask can we summarize the work and the therapeutic plans that you have been doing, not to try and give this as a copy and paste model, of course, for other doctors, but as a sort of second opinion or kind of example of, okay, this is how I translated this science into reality. And I was wondering whether you wanted to perhaps touch on some of the case studies that we collected from you, perhaps in the last 10 minutes that we have together. The time flies, it's incredible.
Yeah, oh my God. I apologize if I'm speaking too fast, but I'm just trying to be cognizant of the time. There's so much to talk, but I'm very glad to be here. So yes, first of all, I really appreciate the fact that you invited me to contribute with a few clinical cases, because what you just said, Viola, is the truth. As doctors, we read the papers, we read the journals, but sometimes it's hard to extrapolate what we read in research and science to the clinical practice. And this is something that when I'm lecturing or giving classes to doctors, teaching doctors, I try to be very explicit in this, because sometimes we see, for example, in refractory epilepsy, where we see the studies of GW Pharma, that they were sometimes in refractory epilepsy using 25, even up to 50 milligrams per kilogram of Epidiolex or cannabidiol in these trials, and then per day in children, right? And then when you go to the clinical practice, you are like, oh my God, so how much should I start with? So and sometimes in the clinical practice, we see that the patient don't need those very high amounts of a dosing. So this is why it's so important. And when in the educational programs that I do, I tried it, the research is extremely valuable, because it gives us the frames or the starting points or the top maximum of dose that being used, so give us this profile of safety to work with the patient. But in the clinical practice, the patients respond very well or different and each patient is so different that we cannot just say every patient will respond to 5 milligrams. So it's a very customized way to do medicine, and this is why I like it. And the cases, some of the cases that I shared was with patients with MS, with multiple sclerosis, that we know that is one of the pathologies that has very good scientific evidence. We have randomized placebo-controlled trials, meta-analysis, systematic reviews, and then in the clinical practice, I was seeing how extrapolating the science and the research into the clinical practice, it was pretty similar but different, because when you're starting with a patient, we have to start from a baseline and then titrating up. But at the end, the conclusions with my patients, it was just that it's not just for spasticity. I saw how the quality of life was improving so much in these patients, the quality of sleeping and many other subjects that you put in the clinical records, and also helping these patients to reduce some of the polypharmacy that they're coming to our clinical practice. So it's very interesting, and now that I'm having these different types of education models, like diploma certification with universities or short certifications, we see that the doctors, they need to see the discussion of cases, of clinical cases that we face every day in the clinical practice, because you can give them the theory, the journals, the papers, but you have to land all that knowledge in the clinical practice context. So I think what you did with the handbook was brilliant, because clinical cases are very important in the clinical practice for doctors. They're learning how to use cannabinoid therapies and see it in the clinical context, how you face the patient, because they're coming with different comorbidities, with polypharmacy. So you need to learn how to manage the drug interactions. But at the end, what I see is a lot of benefits for the patients that they're using these therapies. And in my case, I was talking about MS, multiple sclerosis, spasticity, pain, and quality of life. Incredible.
Is so true, and I would say, for example, and thank you for touching this topic on, for example, as you said, on MS. Of course, we have some of the most consistent and evidence on the use of cannabis, but also there, creating the right type of studies has been hard. We have been using, for example, the Ashworth scale for many years for measuring spasticity, which was kind of a faulty way. And through that type of scale, there weren't really brilliant results in terms of demonstrating whether cannabis was useful. But then on the other side, the quality of life of these people was much better. So actually, it was a matter as well of learning how to study appropriately the pathology, and whether perhaps going into the direction of a subjective scale. And something, for example, I recently was doing a little presentation on neurodegenerative disorders, and there for me is really important, and that's why also in the book it was really important, especially in some pathologies, to also have to show, okay, look, on so far in terms of double-blind placebo-controlled, for example, I take Parkinson's. For Parkinson's, there isn't really much concluding evidence on the use of cannabis for, I mean, cannabis for primary outcome, pretty much for no pathology, okay, so far at least that we found. But at least for symptom management, with really is been showing pretty well in some pathologies, and some others like Parkinson, not so much. The type of studies, well, there are many, but the type of studies that we have aren't really conclusive. And then when you look at the reality of actually doctors that are following patients with Parkinson's, quite often you see that case-to-case studies, actually they have brilliant results. So I felt, it's very reductive to arrive to a doctor and say, well, don't even try, don't even attempt this route, because anyway, our perfectly designed double placebo studies, clinical trials are telling us that this doesn't work, because they are not perfectly designed. And actually, it's a work of trial and error, and we are learning, I think, and this is the beauty of cannabis, that we can learn through real world evidence too. So it is, in this sense, is not a science that is just left in the hands of the scientists in the lab, or in the context of a hospital for a clinical trial, but actually it's a collaborative science done through empirical work as well, like your practice. And that's why I really needed to have a megaphone and be distributed, because it's really important. And I see this as a multiverse collaborative effort. What basically is doing the cannabis industry, it's kind of creating it on its own. So thank you, because it is really needed, and it can change. And I think this, I would like to cite actually another doctor that was previously in one of these lives, Jean-Claude Cicluna, that was saying, perhaps statistically doesn't mean anything because it's one case study, but I can tell you that the life of my patient has changed, and this has a lot of value for me. So we believe in this type of value, and we wanted to distribute that and make sure that also these can, perhaps if it's not peer-reviewed science, but it's still like a tool for support. And
Exactly. We cannot dismiss real world evidence. And this is what I always tell my colleagues. And every time I'm lecturing or talking, of course, randomized placebo controlled clinical trials. Yes, they are the way to go, but we are collecting. And I always encourage my colleagues to gather the information in the clinical records, because it's so much value in there, because at the end of the year, you can put statistics and names and say, see, I was given this product, this medicine to this patient, and I treated this amount of patients for this pathology, and look at the results of, and you collect hundreds, thousands of patients with the results, with the same preparation. So we are, it's, I love the rigorosity of the science, but we have to also see the results that we have in the clinical practice. And that's why some doctors, just with the scientific evidence on the papers, they don't feel 100% confident prescribe it, but when they see the hands-on, the practice, the clinical cases, the discussion, now this is the perfect combination that tells them, okay, I have the science backing up and I have the clinical practice of the doctor. They already use it, and in real life it works. So that's like the perfect match, and we need to find that balance. And that's why the handbook that you're publishing is such a valuable tool for physicians and healthcare practitioners, because you have the perfect combination of science and then the discussion of clinical cases to see how this works in real life, and not in just a special context of a clinical research protocol. So thank you for that, because we need this type of publication of the and handbooks for getting all the doctors all over the world the perspective of there is science and there is experience of doctors that are already using it. That is not that they're coming into the unknown territory that nobody explored. There's a lot of people that's been there, and they can share their experience. So thank you for that very valuable handbook that I hope everybody can have access to that.
Thank you. And I think you said a word that is keyword for me, which is increasing confidence in prescribing. This is something I've seen now over 6 years. So we've been training, for example, doctors over in Italy. But then we realized not really all of the doctors that we train are necessarily going to prescribe. And this is really supporting the confidence of prescription, which is another conversation on its own. It's also, yes, it's based on education, but it's also really based on the support. Do I have a community of other doctors that are already doing it that I can look up, maybe that I can see how they're doing it? And it's basically building a community as well. And in a sense, I think this plant is managing pretty well to create really interesting community, like us, no, with an ocean in between, with many hours of difference of time in between, but pretty much building the same type of world with a very common vision. I see vision here, which
Yes.
means one thing.
I always feel bad when I have to pop back up into the screen, because it means I have to signal the end of our live right now. To be honest, I think we will probably easily sit here for another half hour or more. It was an absolute pleasure with both of you, Sandra. Also, a big thank you to you once more for contributing to our handbook. Also coming from more of a commercial perspective in the industry, and seeing what companies need to do to grow and really move the needle. I think this connection between the clinical work and the practical work is absolutely pivotal, and it's really what drives growth in this industry, and adoption also, along with education, of course. You listed so many things that you do. Thank you so much for finding the time today with us. Thank you again for your contribution. If anybody's watching right now, give our guest today, Dr. Carrillo, a big thank you. That will also help to make sure that more people see the video. The video will also be on YouTube. Check out Dr. Carrillo's profile. Check out the Cannabis Scienza profile. We will be back with more lives. I also think this will certainly not be the last time that we have you on. We certainly hope so.
I hope so.
We also, for the audience, in case anyone is joining from Latin America, we do plan on also in the future making our handbook available in Spanish. And we would also, I'm just going to put it out in the universe, we hope to get more contributions from you, Dr. Carrillo, and more case studies, so we can continue on this fight together. And on that note, thank you to everybody in the audience. Again, leave our guests a big thank you in the comments. Dr. Carrillo, thank you very much. And see you on the next.
I have a very special announcement before we leave this live. Sorry, it's a little impromptu, but actually we always have a Tuesday between 5:30 and 6 Central European time, these lives. But next Tuesday, we will be launching our book at Cannabis Europa in London. So be there. We'll be there in person. Come and say hello in person, but we won't be in your remote space. So this is going to be our only absence, but we will get back on the 9th of May with the next LinkedIn Live. So thank you.
We will share some clips and some insights from Cannabis Europa next week. So you won't be left totally alone, but the next live will be in 2 weeks. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining us, and see you in a couple of weeks. And again, Dr. Carrillo, thank you so much for finding the time today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.